You ever catch yourself mid-action and wonder, wait, why did I even do that? Maybe you said yes when every fiber of your being was screaming no. Maybe you laughed at a joke that wasn't funny and hated yourself a little for it. Maybe you reached for your phone before you even realized your hand was moving, like some part of you was operating on autopilot while the rest of you just watched. Maybe you snapped at someone you love and immediately thought, that wasn't me. Where did that come from? You probably brushed it off, told yourself, I don't know. It's just how I am. The truth is, you aren't just how you are. That's a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the harder work of understanding. Most of what we do, the habits we keep, the words we choose, the people we attract, the patterns we repeat, isn't a conscious choice at all. It's not a reflection of who we are. It's a reflection of what we've been taught to do, programmed to believe, and conditioned to accept without ever knowing it happened. We think we're the authors of our own lives. We think we're making decisions based on logic, on preference, on desire, but the truth is far more unsettling. Most of us are just actors in a play we didn't write, reading lines we didn't choose, playing characters we didn't create. And the most dangerous part, we don't even know we're performing. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life exploring the depths of the human psyche, once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again. Let it sink in. We go through life doing things we don't understand, making choices we can't explain, repeating mistakes we swore we'd never make again. And then we shrug and call it just who I am, or just how life goes. But what if those actions, those automatic reactions, those seemingly inexplicable behaviors are just scripts we've been handed, scripts written by our parents, our teachers, our culture, our pain, scripts we didn't author but are still performing every single day? What if the life you're living isn't really yours? Think about this for a moment. Really think about it. A child who grows up hearing, "Don't talk back," becomes an adult who struggles to speak up in meetings. A teenager praised only when achieving becomes an adult who feels worthless when resting. A kid told, "Stop being so sensitive," becomes an adult who can't access their own emotions. Or worse, an adult who feels broken for having feelings at all. These aren't random quirks. These aren't personality traits you were born with. They're echoes. Reverberations of moments that happened years, sometimes decades ago. Moments you may not even consciously remember, but that your body, your nervous system, your subconscious mind has never forgotten. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, one of the world's leading trauma researchers, wrote in his groundbreaking book, "The Body Keeps the Score." Your body remembers what your conscious mind has long since filed away. That tightness in your chest when someone raises their voice? That's not random. That knot in your stomach before a difficult conversation, that's not weakness. That's your body replaying something it learned long ago, a lesson that got burned into your nervous system before you had the words to understand it. We like to think we've moved on from our childhoods. We like to believe that because we're adults now, because we have jobs and responsibilities and lives of our own, we've somehow transcended the small humans we once were. But the truth is, that child is still running the show. That child is still making decisions. That child is still trying to survive in a world that scared them. Let me tell you about my friend Daniel. Daniel was the king of yes. Yes to extra work. Yes to favors he didn't have time for. Yes to social plans he dreaded. Yes to helping people move. Yes to lending money he couldn't afford to give. Yes to relationships that drained him. Yes, 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 until he had nothing left. His calendar was always packed. His phone was always buzzing. His energy was always depleted. And when I asked him why he couldn't seem to say no, why he ran himself ragged for people who rarely reciprocated, he would just shrug and say, "I don't know. I just feel like I have to." He wasn't even fully aware that he was trapped. He thought he was just being a good person. He thought saying yes made him kind, generous, likable. He thought that if he stopped, something terrible would happen, though he couldn't quite name what. It wasn't until years later, after burnout forced him to slow down, after therapy gave him the tools to dig deeper, that he finally understood. He remembered his father. Specifically, he remembered his father's anger whenever he said no as a child. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no physical violence, just a look, a coldness, a withdrawal of affection that felt to a small child like the end of the world. His father would go silent, would turn away, would withhold love as punishment for the crime of having boundaries. So Daniel learned. He learned that no meant danger. No meant rejection. No meant being unloved. And he carried that lesson into adulthood without ever realizing it, saying yes to everyone and everything, because somewhere deep in his psyche, a little boy was still trying to keep his father's love. Daniel's yes wasn't kindness. It was survival. His mind had been trained, conditioned, programmed to keep peace at any cost, even at the expense of his own happiness, his own health, his own identity. And here's the question that should unsettle you. Isn't that us too? How many of us do things we don't want to do because somewhere deep inside we learned it was safer that way? How many of us abandon ourselves daily, our needs, our desires, our boundaries, because we were taught that's what good people do? How many of us are still performing for approval from people who may not even be in our lives anymore? Let's go deeper. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain. Even the tiniest actions, the ones that seem meaningless, reflexive, insignificant, are shaped by unseen forces. Your brain is not the rational decision-making machine you think it is. It's a prediction engine, a pattern recognition system, a survival mechanism that's been refined over millions of years of evolution. Neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett explains it this way: your brain's primary job isn't to think, it's to predict. It's constantly scanning your environment, comparing the present moment to past experiences, and making lightning-fast calculations about what's going to happen next and what you should do about it. This is why you reach for your phone before you even realize your hand is moving. Think about it. How often do you grab your phone when you're bored? When you're anxious? When you're sitting with an emotion you don't want to feel? Why? Because your brain has learned a pattern. Last time you felt this way, the phone provided relief. It gave you something to do. It distracted you from the discomfort. It offered a hit of dopamine, a moment of escape, a brief reprieve from the unbearable weight of just being. So your brain says, let's do that again. And before your conscious mind even has a chance to weigh in, your hand is already moving. That's not a choice. That's programming. Your brain created a shortcut, a neural pathway, a groove that gets deeper every time you repeat the behavior. And now that groove is so deep, so well worn, that the behavior happens automatically. It's not about willpower. It's not about discipline. It's about the invisible architecture of your mind. Architecture that was built without your conscious consent. Now let's talk about what you're really looking for when you pick up that phone. You're not just looking for entertainment. You're not just killing time. You're looking for connection, for validation, for meaning, for an escape from the gnawing feeling that something is missing. That's why one notification can change your mood. It's not the sound. It's not the vibration. It's not even the message itself. It's the story your brain attaches to it. Someone thought of me. Someone sees me. I matter. I'm not alone. We are hardwired for connection. It's not a preference. It's a biological imperative. For most of human history, being alone meant death. The tribe kept you safe. Being accepted by the group was literally a matter of survival. So your brain evolved to treat social rejection like physical pain. Studies have shown that the same brain regions that activate when you experience physical pain also light up when you experience rejection. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference. So when you're scrolling through your feed at 2 a.m., you're not just wasting time. Your brain is on a survival mission. It's searching for evidence that you belong, that you matter, that you're okay. It's trying to fill a hole that can't be filled with likes and comments and follower counts, but it doesn't know that. It just knows it hurts, and it's looking for relief. The tragedy is that the very thing we reach for to feel connected often leaves us feeling more alone. The comparison, the curated highlight reels, the parasocial relationships that feel intimate but aren't. We're more connected than ever and lonelier than ever, and we can't quite figure out why. We all carry stories, narratives about who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve. Some of these stories empower us. They give us wings. They tell us we can, we're enough, we're worthy. But most of our stories, most of them are cages, invisible prisons we've constructed out of other people's words, other people's judgments, other people's limitations. And the cruelest part, we don't even know we're telling them. They've become so familiar, so automatic, so much a part of our internal landscape that we mistake them for truth. Let me tell you about Emma. Emma was brilliant, sharp, capable. She had ideas that could have changed her company, innovations that could have propelled her career, insights that her colleagues desperately needed to hear. But Emma never spoke up, never applied for promotions, never put herself forward for leadership roles. When opportunities arose, she hung back. When credit was given, she deflected. When recognition came knocking, she pretended she wasn't home. When I asked her why she played small when she was clearly meant for more, she said something that stopped me cold. I'm just not leadership material. Not leadership material. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like it was an objective truth, like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. But I pushed. I asked where that belief came from. And after some resistance, some discomfort, some digging, she remembered. A teacher, high school, a throwaway comment after Emma had given a presentation. The teacher had said, almost as an afterthought, "You're too quiet to lead." That's it. One sentence, one casual remark from someone who probably forgot about it 5 minutes later. But that sentence became Emma's story. It planted a seed of self-doubt that took root in her young mind and grew year after year until it became an unquestioned truth, until it became the invisible ceiling she couldn't even see. Think about how insidious this is. A teenager, still forming her identity, still figuring out who she is and what she's capable of, receives a single piece of feedback from an authority figure. And because she's young, because she doesn't have the tools to challenge it, because the teacher holds power she doesn't, she accepts it, she absorbs it, she becomes it. That single sentence robbed Emma of decades of potential. How many promotions didn't she apply for? How many ideas didn't she share? How many rooms didn't she walk into with confidence? All because one person, one time, said she was too quiet. How many of us are living inside someone else's words? Here's what you need to understand. Your beliefs about yourself were not formed in a vacuum. They didn't spring fully formed from your own experience and rational analysis. They were given to you, installed, downloaded into your operating system before you were old enough to have a firewall. And not just by teachers, by parents obviously, but also by siblings, by peers, by bullies, by exes, by bosses, by culture, by media, by 1,000 tiny moments that added up to a mountain of meaning. You were told you were too much or not enough, too loud or too quiet, too sensitive or too cold. You were told to man up or calm down. You were told to smile more or talk less. You were told you were the smart one or the pretty one, and you learned that meant you couldn't be the other. You were compared to siblings, to classmates, to impossible standards. You were praised for some things and ignored for others, and you learned, without anyone explicitly teaching you, which parts of yourself were acceptable and which parts needed to be hidden. Dr. Gabor Mate, the renowned physician and trauma expert, says that children don't get traumatized because they're hurt. They get traumatized because they're alone with the hurt. And most of us were alone with hurts we couldn't process, couldn't understand, couldn't integrate. So we did the only thing we could. We adapted, we contorted ourselves to fit, we killed off the parts that weren't welcome and exaggerated the parts that were. And now, decades later, we wonder why we feel fragmented, why we don't know who we really are, why we're so disconnected from our authentic selves that we can't even identify what we genuinely want. Maya Angelou once said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." But here's the thing, you can't know better if you don't first see what you're doing. You can't change what you're not aware of. And the first step to rewriting your story is recognizing, really, viscerally recognizing that the story you're telling yourself right now may not even be yours. It may just be a hand-me-down, a relic, a ghost of someone else's limitations haunting your life. If you want to see your unconscious patterns in action, look at your relationships. They're the clearest mirror we have. Think about how you react when someone criticizes you. Not what you say, how you react. In your body, in your nervous system, in that split second before your conscious mind kicks in with a response. Do you shut down? Do your walls go up so fast you can practically hear them slam? Do you go blank, unable to access words, your throat closing like a door? Or do you fight back? Do you feel the heat rise in your chest, the words sharpening themselves into weapons before they leave your mouth? Do you attack before you can be attacked? Or do you laugh it off? Brush it aside with a joke, a shrug, a whatever, it doesn't matter, even when it matters so much you can barely breathe? These aren't random reactions. They're not personality types. They're rehearsed, practiced, perfected over years of repetition until they became automatic. Your nervous system learned a long time ago how to respond to threat. And criticism, to a child's brain, is absolutely a threat. It's a threat to belonging, to love, to survival. So your body reacts before your mind has a chance to weigh in. By the time you're consciously aware of what's happening, you're already in the pattern. You're already doing the thing you've done 1,000 times before, and afterward you feel confused or ashamed or frustrated with yourself, wondering why you can't just respond differently. Let me tell you about John. John was proud of one thing in his marriage. He never argued with his wife, never raised his voice, never let things escalate. He saw himself as calm, mature, the stable one. But when we talked more, a different picture emerged. It wasn't that John and his wife agreed on everything. Far from it. It was that John avoided conflict at all costs. He swallowed his opinions. He stuffed his frustrations. He smiled when he was seething and said, "It's fine," when nothing was fine at all. Why? Because when John was 7 years old, his parents were at war. They fought constantly, screaming matches that shook the walls, thrown dishes, slammed doors, cold silences that lasted days. The house was a battlefield, and John was a child caught in the crossfire. So John made a decision, not a conscious one, but a survival decision, written in the language of his nervous system. He decided that arguments meant danger, that conflict meant chaos, that if he could just stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible, maybe he'd be safe. He carried that decision into adulthood, into his marriage, into every relationship he ever had. His silence wasn't peace, it was terror. His calm wasn't maturity, it was a freeze response so habitual he didn't even recognize it anymore. John's wife thought he didn't care enough to fight for things. What she didn't know was that John cared so much he'd learned to disappear. He was replaying his childhood every day, avoiding the emotional apocalypse he'd once witnessed, not realizing that his avoidance was creating a different kind of apocalypse, a slow death of intimacy, of honesty, of connection. Our families aren't the only programmers. Culture is a massive operating system that shapes everything from how we see success to how we feel about our bodies. Think about something as simple as speaking up. In some cultures, speaking your mind is confidence, assertiveness, a sign of self-respect and healthy ego. But in others, it's arrogance, disrespect, a violation of social harmony. The same action, raising your voice in a meeting, can mean completely different things depending on where you grew up. In one context, you're a leader. In another, you're a threat. Your behavior hasn't changed. The script interpreting it has. This is why we sometimes feel out of place when we move, travel, or change environments. Our invisible scripts clash with new ones. We're speaking a language nobody around us understands, and we can't figure out why we're being misread. I know a woman who grew up in a culture that valued modesty above almost everything else. Don't brag. Don't shine too bright. Don't make others feel inferior by displaying your gifts. She internalized this deeply. It became code, law, the water she swam in without ever knowing she was wet. Then she moved to a country where self-promotion was expected, where selling yourself was a skill, not a sin, where if you don't talk about your accomplishments, no one will know about them, was conventional wisdom. She was paralyzed. Every job interview felt like a violation of everything she'd been taught. Every networking event was an exercise in self-betrayal. She knew she needed to promote herself to succeed, but doing so felt physically wrong, like breaking a sacred oath, like betraying her people, like losing herself. She wasn't just fighting the job market, she was fighting generations of cultural programming. And she was doing it alone, wondering why she couldn't just be more confident like everyone kept telling her to. Consider how culture shapes our relationship with work and rest. In some corporate environments, and indeed in some entire countries, taking a break is seen as laziness, weakness, a sign that you're not committed, not serious, not cut out for the big leagues. You eat lunch at your desk. You answer emails on vacation. You wear your exhaustion like a badge of honor because burnout is proof of dedication. But in other contexts, breaks are seen as intelligent, strategic, a sign that you understand sustainable performance, that you value quality over quantity, that you're sophisticated enough to know that constant grinding leads to diminishing returns. Same action, different meaning, and you, caught in the middle, wonder why you feel guilty when you rest, why you feel anxious when you're not productive, why you can't shake the feeling that your worth is measured in output. That's not your truth. That's your programming. Think about the messages you absorbed about work. Were your parents workaholics who sacrificed everything for their careers? Did they come home exhausted, too depleted to be present? Did you learn that this is what responsibility looks like? Self-sacrifice until there's no self left. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe your family struggled financially. Maybe you watched your parents scrape by, stress etched into their faces, and you swore you'd never be in that position. So you work and work and work, trying to outrun a fear you've never named, the fear of ending up like them, the fear that security is always one mistake away from crumbling. Either way, your relationship with work isn't neutral. It's loaded with history, with meaning, with other people's stories. And until you unpack it, you'll keep running on someone else's script. And then there's pain. Pain is one of the most powerful forces shaping unconscious behavior, maybe the most powerful. If you've ever been betrayed, you might struggle to trust. Not because you're cynical, not because you've rationally decided trust isn't worth the risk, but because your nervous system remembers. It remembers the shock of discovery, the vertigo of realizing someone you trusted was not who you thought. It remembers the collapse, the shattering, the rebuilding, and it doesn't want to go through that again. So it puts up walls before you even realize you're doing it. It scans for threats. It looks for evidence that this person, too, will betray you. It interprets innocent behavior through the lens of past wounds, and you push people away while telling yourself you're just being careful. If you've been abandoned, truly left, truly rejected, you might cling too tightly. You might become the person who texts too much, who needs constant reassurance, who panics when a partner needs space. Not because you're needy or clingy or any of the dismissive labels you've been given, but because your brain learned that people leave. That connection is temporary, that if you loosen your grip for even a second, the person you love will vanish. If you've been shamed, for your body, your desires, your emotions, your thoughts. You might hide parts of yourself. You might have entire regions of your being that you've walled off, buried, pretended don't exist, because those experiences taught you that exposing yourself means risking hurt. That vulnerability is dangerous. That the real you, the uncurated, unfiltered, raw you, is too much for the world to handle. I've watched this play out more times than I can count. A man I know grew up with an emotionally distant father. His father wasn't cruel, wasn't abusive, just absent. Physically there, but emotionally unreachable. Affection was rare, and when it came, it was always conditional. Based on performance, based on achievement, based on being someone worthy of love rather than just being. As an adult, this man became a machine. He worked relentlessly, won awards, climbed ladders, collected achievements like some people collect stamps. From the outside, he looked like the definition of success. From the inside, he was hollow, exhausted, never enough. He didn't know how to stop because stopping meant worthlessness. He didn't know how to rest because rest meant risking that conditional love disappearing, even though his father was long dead by now. The ghost remained. The programming persisted. He was still performing for an audience of one that no longer existed. When he finally slowed down, when his body forced him to through illness, he asked himself a question he'd been avoiding for decades. Why am I always pushing? What's driving me? The answer broke him open. If I prove myself, I'll finally be loved. If I achieve enough, I'll finally be worthy. He'd spent his entire life trying to earn something that should have been given freely. And the most heartbreaking part? No amount of achievement could fill that hole. Because the hole wasn't about achievement. It was about a little boy who just wanted his father to see him, to be proud of him, to love him not for what he did, but for who he was. Let's take a pause here, a real one. I want you to think about one thing you do often that doesn't quite make sense. One pattern you keep repeating even though it doesn't serve you. Maybe you procrastinate when you genuinely want to get something done. Maybe you overwork, pushing yourself to exhaustion even when there's no external pressure. Maybe you avoid conflict at all costs. Or maybe you create it, picking fights for reasons you don't understand. Maybe you self-sabotage, torpedoing your own success just when things start going well. Maybe you choose unavailable partners, or stay too long in situations that hurt you, or can't accept compliments, or apologize for existing. Whatever it is, name it. Sit with it. Now ask yourself, when did I first learn this? I spoke with someone recently who was haunted by procrastination. He thought he was lazy. He'd spent years berating himself for his lack of discipline, trying productivity apps and accountability systems and punishment reward schemes. Nothing worked. The procrastination always won. But as we talked, really talked, something emerged. As a child, his parents had impossibly high standards. Anything less than perfect was failure. Mistakes weren't learning opportunities. They were evidence of inadequacy. The message, absorbed over thousands of interactions, was clear. Getting it wrong's not okay. So he learned to delay, to avoid, to put off starting because starting meant risking failure. His procrastination wasn't laziness. It was fear dressed up as delay. It was protection. It was a child's solution to an impossible situation. That realization changed everything for him. He didn't suddenly become a productivity machine, but he stopped hating himself for the pattern. He started treating himself with compassion instead of contempt. And slowly, gently, he began to write a different story. Here's what I need you to understand. Really understand, in your bones. These patterns are not your fault. They're not character flaws. They're not moral failings. They're not evidence that you're broken or weak or defective. They're survival mechanisms. They're solutions you created, often as a child, often without any conscious awareness, to cope with situations that were too big for you. They helped you navigate environments you had no control over. They kept you safe, or at least safer, when safety wasn't guaranteed. The yield, people-pleasing. That was you figuring out how to avoid conflict in a home where conflict was dangerous. The perfectionism? That was you trying to be good enough for parents whose love felt conditional. The emotional shutdown. That was you protecting yourself from feelings that would have overwhelmed you. These patterns made sense. They worked. They got you here. But here's the thing about survival mechanisms. They have a shelf life. The walls that protected you as a child become the prison that traps you as an adult. The hypervigilance that kept you safe from an unpredictable parent now keeps you anxious in stable relationships. The self-reliance that helped you survive neglect now prevents you from accepting support. What saved you is now suffocating you. And holding on to it, continuing to let it control your present, isn't survival anymore. It's just repetition. It's just a loop playing over and over, solving a problem that no longer exists. You don't live in that house anymore. You're not that child anymore. The danger has passed, but your nervous system didn't get the memo. It's still on high alert, still scanning, still protecting you from ghosts. So how do we change? How do we break free from scripts we didn't write? It starts with noticing, simply noticing. Before you can change a pattern, you have to see it. You have to catch yourself in the act, not with judgment, not with shame, but with curiosity. There it is again. There's that thing I do. Interesting. This is harder than it sounds. We're so embedded in our patterns that they feel like reality itself. The water we swim in is invisible precisely because we've never known anything else. Developing the ability to step back, to observe yourself with some degree of objectivity, that's a skill. It takes practice. Journaling helps. Not the curated, Instagram-worthy kind, but the messy, honest, stream of consciousness kind. Write what you feel. Write what you did. Write what you're confused about. The act of putting things on paper creates distance, creates perspective, allows you to see patterns you'd never notice otherwise. Therapy helps. A skilled therapist is like a mirror that shows you yourself more clearly. They notice what you don't notice. They ask questions that interrupt your automatic thinking. They provide the safety to explore the uncomfortable, the shameful, the hidden. Honest conversations help. The right friend, the right partner, someone who can say, "Hey, I've noticed you do this thing," without it feeling like an attack. Someone who creates space for you to wonder, to question, to not have all the answers. The goal isn't to erase the past. You can't. It happened, it shaped you, it's part of your story. The goal is to understand it, to see it clearly, to recognize that the past is one thing and the present is another, and that you have a choice about which one you let run your life. Once you see the invisible script, really see it, you can choose, keep it or rewrite it, follow it or set it down, let it continue directing you, or finally take the pen into your own hands. There was a man I know who always rushed. Meals were inhaled, not savored. Conversations were competitions to be won, not connections to be made. Even vacations, the one thing designed for rest, felt like items on a checklist to be completed as efficiently as possible. Everything was a race. Every moment was urgent. His leg bounced constantly. His mind was always 3 steps ahead, rarely present where his body actually was. One day, his daughter asked him a simple question. "Daddy, why are you always in a hurry?" He didn't have an answer. He opened his mouth to give one, some reasonable adult explanation about responsibilities and obligations, but nothing came. He didn't know. He'd never stopped long enough to ask. Later, in a quiet moment, he let himself think about it. Really think. And something surfaced. His father had been the same way, always rushing, always behind, always scrambling, and his father before him. The rushing wasn't just a habit. It was an inheritance, a generational hand-me-down, passed from father to son like a genetic mutation. His grandfather had grown up in poverty, genuinely racing against time to survive. For him, urgency was necessary. Every wasted moment was a meal not earned, a bill not paid, a family not fed. But that reality was 3 generations ago. The man wasn't poor, his time wasn't scarce, his family was fed. And yet he rushed, because that's what the men in his family did, because urgency was baked into his DNA, into his nervous system, into his very sense of what it meant to be a responsible man. When he saw it, really saw it, something shifted. He understood that the rushing wasn't serving him, it wasn't protecting him, it was just happening. A ghost running his life. So he made a choice. He slowed down. Just enough. He started catching himself mid-rush and asking, is this urgent, or am I just replaying a pattern? Do I need to hurry, or is that just the tape that's always playing? The pattern didn't disappear overnight. It still tugs at him. But now he sees it, and seeing is power. I want to be honest with you about something. Awareness doesn't mean instant change. Reading this won't magically transform you. Understanding your patterns intellectually is not the same as transcending them. You can know exactly why you do what you do, and still do it anyway. Because these patterns live in your body, not just your mind. They're encoded in your nervous system, in your muscles, in your posture, in your breath. They've been rehearsed 10,000 times. They're automatic, and automatic doesn't override easily. You'll still feel the pull of the old ways. You'll still find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, still reaching for the phone, still avoiding the conversation, still rushing, still performing, still surviving in situations that don't require survival. But now, and this is the crucial part, now you'll know why. And knowing changes everything. Because once you know why, you have a choice. Before, you were on autopilot, reacting, not responding, executing code, not making decisions. But now there's a gap, a tiny space between stimulus and response where you get to decide. That space is freedom. It's small at first. Maybe you catch yourself mid-pattern 1 time out of 10, then 2, then 3. Slowly, incrementally, the old grooves get filled in and new ones get worn. The automatic becomes intentional. The unconscious becomes conscious. It's not fast. It's not flashy. It doesn't make for good Instagram content. But it's real. And it's the only path there is. James Baldwin, who spent his life confronting uncomfortable truths, wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." That's the whole thing, right there. Face it. Face the invisible scripts. The inherited fears, the borrowed beliefs, the survival patterns that have outlived their purpose, the stories written by other people that you've been reading as your own. Ask where they came from, dig into the history, unearth the roots, not to blame, not to shame, not to wallow, but to understand, to drag the unconscious into the light where it loses its power, and then decide, does this still serve me? Is this who I want to be? Am I willing to keep paying this price? Because everything has a cost. The people-pleasing has a cost. The perfectionism has a cost. The walls, the avoidance, the rushing, the performing, all of it extracts a toll. And you're the one paying it. For most of your life, you've been paying without knowing. Paying invisibly. Paying automatically. But now you see. So what will you choose? Rumi, the 13th century poet, wrote, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. The world outside you is chaotic and largely beyond your control. Other people will do what they do. Circumstances will unfold as they unfold. But this, the internal landscape, the patterns, the scripts, this is yours. This is the one territory you can actually claim, the one frontier you can actually explore, the one thing you can actually change. It won't be easy. It will require you to look at things you've spent years avoiding. It will ask you to feel things you've spent years numbing. It will demand a kind of courage that gets no applause, wins no trophies, earns no public recognition. But it will set you free. Not free from struggle, not free from pain, but free from the particular prison of living someone else's life. Free from the exhausting performance of being who you think you should be. Free to discover who you actually are, underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the noise. The moment you see why you do what you do, you're no longer just living, you're choosing. And that makes all the difference. So look in the mirror, not the one on your wall, the one in your behavior, your reactions, your patterns, your pain. What do you see? What scripts are running? Whose voice is speaking? It's time to write your own lines,